I think that should work. Well, happy Monday, everyone. I think it's Monday. My name is Rachel Ryan. I am I'm a coach in our career development office at SOM. It's great to have you all on with us today. We have a really fantastic group here ready to share their insights. Just a little bit of background on what I mean by the career development office, and you might be even thinking, well, what's a coach? In our career development office at SOM, we have a whole staff, a team of people who are eager to help you as you join SOM and kind of take off on your career search and journey here with us. We have a team called our employer partner team. They are dedicated to working with employers across industries to kind of engage with them in different ways on campus and kind of help to connect students with various opportunities. Then we also have a coaching team, that's what I'm on, where we meet with students all the way through their time at SOM. And I froze for a second, but I'm going to keep talking. I'll unfreeze in just a second. We have a team of coaches at SOM. Here we go. We have a team of us who work with you when you first join, all the way from the summer, where we work with you on resume prep and walking through the process and the timeline. And meeting with you one-on-one and various coaching appointments to help you think about your search strategy, to help you work on cover letters, prepare for interviews, all kinds of different things. And we actually even have staff dedicated to working with alumni after as well. So we really view it as kind of a lifelong partnership in terms of how we help support you in your career search. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to our fabulous panelists. They are going to provide a brief introduction on where they're from and what they did prior to SOM and where they studied, all of that. And I'm going to ask Ian to start. And also, as a part of Ian's introduction, I thought it might be helpful for everyone to also hear a little bit about how we're even thinking about design and innovation, just so that we're all kind of operating with the same language. I know you're probably all wondering, I don't even know what this means. So totally fine. That's what we're here for. And so with that, maybe Ian, you can kick it off.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm a second year in the MBA program. My name is Ian Weidenheimer. I'm from Connecticut and Massachusetts. I studied for undergrad at Brown University in Rhode Island, and I worked in architecture for 7 years before returning to graduate school. In terms of the definition of D&I and what our club does, we are a club that is dedicated to iterative and creative thinking that is applied across all sectors to solve really tough or ambiguous problems. So I think historically, people might think of design and innovation as being a design consultancy like IDEO and Frog that works, let's say, on new digital services or products. And that certainly is one path that we support through our club. But we also support people who want to work for government or for startups or in large corporations innovating from within. And I think the common thread is a spirit of creativity and an embrace of complexity and ambiguity that complements other clubs at the school, be it the tech club or the consulting club.
Thank you. Claire, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So hello, everybody. Before SOM, I grew up in Chicago. I got a bachelor's in art history from Yale University, and then I went and got a master's in museum curation from the Courtauld Institute of Art in London. So like Ian, my path to an MBA is less than traditional. Immediately before SOM, I was working in fundraising at a ballet company in Chicago. And I'm here to do something a little different. Take it away, Isabelle.
Thanks, Claire. I'm going to be the token not arts background here on the D&I panel. So I'm Isabelle. I'm also a second year full-time MBA. I'm from New York City originally. I was actually a public policy major at the University of Chicago for undergrad, and then I spent 5 years working in at a boutique consulting firm that did risk management and compliance at financial institutions. And I'm on the innovation within corporate companies path for innovating. So I'll talk more about that today.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask each of you a few questions, and then the rest of the time will be spent answering the group's questions. So first question, and maybe we'll do this in reverse order this time. So leading with you, Isabelle, talk a little bit about why you decided to come to SOM. Why did you choose SOM?
Yeah, I think you'll probably hear this from a lot of students that you talk to, but my first answer is always the people. For me, it's so much about, it's not just the kind of the courses and the resources that are available to you at a school, although of course that's important. But if you're looking at these top schools in a lot of ways, if you have some drive and you have, the motivation, you can find what you need. What's going to be most important to you is, do you click with the people who you're in the room with every day? Do you feel like they're the kind of diverse perspectives that you're looking for? And then also, like, kind of by extension, do you feel like you could probably pick up the phone and call kind of anyone in the alumni pool and feel like you can hit it off with them as well? And so it was really important for me throughout the kind of process of choosing a school, was just like how I hit it off with different students at SOM and how I hit it off with alums, and the fact that everyone I spoke to like had 8 more people to connect me to, and I just had almost like choice overload of people to talk to at SOM was just very, very telling for me. So.
Thank you. Claire?
The eventual, like, why I chose SOM is identical to Isabelle's, but actually the reason Yale made it onto my list in the first place is I knew that I was coming from, they say non-traditional background is just anybody who's not coming directly from management consulting. And I was looking for schools that would sort of know what to do with someone who had never, had to pitch to a client like that before, or, any of those skills. So I looked at sort of arts institutions that had organizers and C-suite executives that had MBAs, and basically everybody I saw had an MBA from Yale SOM. So while I wasn't 100% sold on, I'm going to go and work in the arts post MBA, I knew that this would be a place that knew what to do with my skills, knew what to do with me, and would provide me with a network of people who'd sort of face the same challenges coming into an MBA program.
Ian?
And for me, it's I sought out Yale because of how integrated the MBA program is with the broader university. In architecture, I was overseeing a lot of very large scale urban master plans around the world, and I began to be very interested in kind of what a lot of the consultants were doing in transportation or utilities, or the emerging business models that were developing like a whole host of services across cities. And I realized that a lot of these interests of mine were very interdisciplinary. So although they were business problems, they also had a political bend or an environmental bend or a legal bend. And I knew that I needed to be in an MBA program that would allow me to go to the law school or the environmental school or the policy school, and in turn have students who share those interests. So I actually shied away from a lot of the traditional MBA programs that are silos, and really only applied to ones that had actual kind of meaningful relationships with their host universities, be it that they, are actually on campus, or they have dual appointment faculty and an immense amount of dual degree students. And so, just to summarize, I do think that the level of integration at SOM is quite unique, and it serves people well who have an interdisciplinary interest.
All true. Can you guys talk a little bit about where you interned this summer and what your career goals are for after graduation? Claire, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. So this summer I interned at Hugo and Hobie. It's a small furniture startup. Recently got our B Corp certification here in New Haven, started by 2 SOM alumni. It was kind of a nice transition for me. It was very furniture focused, and my academic career and my professional career has been a little more furniture focused than most. I got experience in startup industry. I got some experience in marketing, so it gave me a nice pivot. Post-grad, I am looking, to out of the arts, ideally in the technology field.
Great. Isabelle?
So this summer I interned at Discover Financial Services, like the credit card. They have a leadership development program. So this summer I was in a marketing rotation, which was totally new to me as someone who'd been in the back office in compliance. And I will be returning there after school for 2 years more of rotating throughout the business, and then hopefully on to somewhere cool within the bank.
Awesome. And Ian?
I interned at 2 places this summer. The first is 500 Startups, which is a seed investor and a startup incubator that works globally, mostly in emerging markets. And I also worked for the New York City Mayor's Office of the Chief Technology Officer on their innovation team. Both kind of experiences were ultimately about how to kind of like innovate and improve cities. And after graduation, I'm interested in the kind of innovation and urban field, broadly defined.
Very cool. So you guys can see how, and all as club leaders, there are a lot of different paths that you can take. Everything from startup, more larger organization, rotational, having a couple different internships, both really different. So hopefully that illustrates kind of the breadth in terms of the student population that this club works with, and also just at SOM in general, how students pursue all kinds of different interests and opportunities. And we definitely view that as a key part of the exploration process, and highly encourage students when they join to really take the time to explore all different areas that they might be interested in. Ian, maybe sticking with you, can you talk about some of the career resources that were most helpful to you, or have been so far, at least? I know you're still going.
So I, came to an MBA knowing that I wasn't going to do traditional recruiting. My interests don't really align well with banking, consulting, big tech. And I also, having worked for about 8 years, kind of knew that I didn't want to go into like a big rotational program. I wanted to go into kind of like a growing niche industry and kind of just like be in the place where I wanted to be. And so with that goal in mind, I knew I had to do all of my recruiting on my own. And so a lot of the resources that I used were related to the alumni network. So there is a university-wide career and kind of alumni directory that I used. There's an SOM specific directory that was also very helpful. Most people who I contacted from the Yale community responded. And then the CDO was really helpful for me in kind of game planning. I actually work with Rachel a lot, and I would kind of come with my list of contacts, and we would strategize about how I could actually turn these conversations into something tangible. And then around the time when I started looking for internships very seriously, which was in January, February, March of last year, COVID hit, which of course was like a public health and economic and political crisis. And so in that context, I would say that the people who I'd connected to in the prior months, as well as Yale alumni, became extremely important to me. And, I'm still very much kind of like using those relationships as I move forward this year.
And ultimately landed with a couple really cool internships. So great story there. Claire, can you talk about some of the career resources that you used?
A lot like Ian, I really relied on the alumni databases, LinkedIn, just talking to specific alumni. Because I'm making such a big career transition, a lot of this was about sort of making meaningful connections, having people that I could really go to and turn to as mentors. And I think what's amazing about the SOM alumni network is that we're a very small school. And so like even those blind LinkedIn messages got some of the best conversations I've had. I have people that have fought for me. I got rejected from one internship and they went and fought for me in that situation, which was incredible. So this really is sort of has been a big part of how I think about my career strategy.
Yeah, you guys took all the good ones, but I'll round it out. My transition from working in the kind of back office and financial services to a rotational program belies the fact that I cast a really, really wide net. I didn't come to SOM necessarily knowing that I wanted to go into a large corporate or knowing even that I wanted to return to financial services. I really wanted to keep an open mind, having worked only in that industry, and just kind of see what happened. So for me, both the kind of reaching out to alumni across all sorts of different industries, the coffee chats, the mock interviews, the kind of sort of more formal type stuff that you'll see like listed for the CDO was super instrumental to me in just kind of figuring out not only just like how to take what for me was a really niche, like very subject matter expert resume and make it broader and write a good cover letter and all of that kind of stuff, but also just like figure out where I might want to go and what industries were and were not interesting to me, and just kind of like get information, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, actually, I would add, based off what Isabelle said, is even though, I wasn't using the traditional recruiting resources for a job, I still kind of was almost like a leech and globbed on. So for example, I joined a casing team to learn how to case as if I were applying to McKinsey. And those skills like really helped me in my interviews, and also just kind of helped me make sense of the core curriculum, which is extremely intense and very fast. So even, I think a great part of being at SOM is it is so small, or no, it's not so small, but it's a smaller community and it's extremely well funded. So there's a lot going on, and you can take advantage of resources that might not be like directly applicable to your search or your goals, but are kind of indirectly supporting your growth.
Yeah, and I would also say, you've heard reference like company presentations and coffee chats and what we're calling a little bit more of like the on-campus activity that flows through the career development office. Then there's also all these network-driven opportunities as well. Just to kind of emphasize, some of the employers that engage with our office are startups or are, areas within larger organizations that are super innovative. They're just like a really wide range of employers that engage with us. But probably the most notable kind of event that we would do in terms of design and innovation specifically that I kind of want to reference at the start is when you're engaged in orientation, we do a full day called Career Immersion, where we have all different alumni panels across industries and functions. So some of the larger kind of industries such as, like investment banking or consulting, but we also have a whole panel dedicated towards design and innovation, where we bring in alumni who've graduated in the last 2 to 5 years or so, to come and talk about just what a day in the life is like, how they thought about their search, advice they have, just to kind of really get a lay of the land and an idea for the various opportunities that could exist. And, we have other panels too, like startup panels and all different kinds of things. And that's before you even formally start. So, again, exploration, I think, being a real key theme in terms of how we just really want to encourage that and everyone to follow their own path. So with that, actually, I want to talk a little bit, or have you guys talk a little bit about the club and the role that the D&I club plays at SOM, because it's unique in that you do a lot of different things. Does anyone want to start talking about the club? And then I'm sure the group would also love to hear about how you've adapted the club in terms of COVID and some of the virtual work you've had to do.
Totally. I can kick us off. When Rachel is saying we're unique, part of what she's alluding to is most clubs at SOM fall into the career bucket or the social bucket. So there's a lot of kind of affinity or social groups or sports groups. And then there's, marketing, tech, kind of consulting, obviously kind of career and recruitment oriented. And we like to live in both worlds. So we do a lot of both. That has made the transition to online really has brought a lot of challenges in making sure that we serve both of those parts of our community, but it makes the D&I alum community specifically strong as well. In the D&I sort of community on campus, it's like a big piece of it. So what we do on the career side is we do kind kind of what Ian was saying at the top of the call, try to cater to that whole range of kind of different needs of what people want for sort of D&I. So we have everything from kind of providing like higher touch sort of advice and opportunities to do work that would add to a portfolio kind of thing if you want to apply to some of these like formal design consultancies or design roles, to kind of a lighter touch curriculum that walks you through sort of frameworks, templates, kind of ways of approaching a problem, so that, you know, you're not a design expert, but at a high level, you could go in and say, I have a complex problem and I have a way to sort of tackle it and approach it. In a lot of ways, it's a sort of distilled, that one is a very distilled version of a core course that is here called Innovator, but it gives folks who are recruiting in the fall a chance to kind of like understand and be able to speak to that, put their hands at a couple of mini projects, things like that. So we run the range of kind of whatever you need, from ways of thinking to supplement your casing team to I need stuff to put into my portfolio so that I can apply to this more kind of formal consultant or formal design role, and all of that sort of in between. And then obviously supplement with things like workshops or lunch and learns, bringing folks in to kind of talk about kind of like career immersion, but through the rest of the semester. Someone else want to sort of take a little bit on how we've transitioned online. I think, you know, the curriculum piece is the easy part. We, easy in quotes, you know, you hold a meeting and so you can put the slides in a Zoom instead. What has been very challenging for us is, you know, so much of our process is working with your team and kind of getting to talk and brainstorm. And, you know, we just can't on Zoom do the same thing where we could walk around the classroom and get a little bit of feedback and see how things are going. So we've done our best to sort of supplement that kind of overall piece with sort of like safe hangouts. So we do a lot of these kind of 8 to 10 people meet on a lawn somewhere and get to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about stuff. Just get some of that face time with the people that you're working with. That makes, I think, the curriculum piece go smoother. That's one thing we've tried to do to preserve some of the social aspects, at least while the weather's still good up here.
I've also been really impressed in that during this hard time with all these challenges, it's, you know, obviously requires a lot of problem solving and solutions. And I found it really interesting the way you guys have woven that in to your curriculum in terms of like how you've been teaching a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Something that sort of surprised me about clubs at business school that I think is maybe a good place to start is that club meetings are less like, you know, we go and we're like, oh, we're planning this big event, like, let's talk about it. Certainly with the sort of career focused clubs and D&I in our career focused hat, it's more about sort of like practice and exposure. So the way we've structured our curriculum this year is we have sort of 2 design sprints. We have bigger problems that we're giving our club members and asking them to sort of go through the design thinking process to come up with a solution. And as sort of Ian and Isabelle have mentioned, design thinking is really about like when you're faced with something in the gray area, how do you come up with a way forward? So our first design sprint was about remote learning. How do we make that more enjoyable for parents with school-aged children? And then our second sprint, which we've just concluded, was about food distribution systems. And we tried to sort of focus here in New Haven because there's a lot happening right in our backyard that we at least should be aware of as good neighbors. And I think that's also something to do with sort of what we do outside of our core curriculum. A lot of our sort of collaborative opportunities, we're kind of like the go-to club for collaboration with other clubs. They're all workshops because really what defines our club is that we're a way of thinking. We're a process, we're not a subject. So it's how do you apply this to these different industries? So we've got one coming up with healthcare technology that's going to be working with a startup and they need some help. We're going to be doing one with a recent alum has been having some issues with the name of his new company. So we're going to do sort of a brainstorm session with him and our club members and his employees, where we work through sort of like what he wants from a name and how we can get a better name for him. So we're doing sort of a lot of different things. It's a lot of practical application, which is also kind of the fun stuff. Like after a day of classes, you don't really want to be talked at for another hour. We're gonna get you moving and get you going on Zoom, but you know, it's the same thing.
And I want to give a special shout out to Claire and Isabelle. I think the club really practices that methodology on itself. And so Claire is leading all of these social activities. So like on our Instagram, other students will do these live concerts. And I think one of the ideas is that we all just wish we could be with each other more, but can't because of COVID. And we're also tired of Zoom. So you can like stream an Instagram performance by our friend Hill and like kind of put it on the other side of the room and just like hear her voice. And it's actually really, really nice. And Isabelle runs these just like truly zany, soulful, like madly chaotic newsletters that go out every week that are not your typical kind of like MBA cookie cutter newsletter, but are actually kind of getting to like how we all feel right now as people, with like links and videos and songs, and in addition to like normal club updates, like, you know, who has an internship or who's giving a cool talk somewhere. And so I think the club is, it's become a really nice place just to like work with other people in a more holistic way. And there are 5 second-year leaders, and I think we have how many first-year leaders, like 8 or 9? 9. So it's becoming this really big group of students that pull just so many people in from across the school. You know, I'm working tomorrow with some architecture students who want to get involved in a D&I project, and it's become a bit of a nexus of activity and fun.
That's great. No, it's so much fun to follow your club. Can you guys talk a little, there was a question that came in about the culture and describing the SOM culture and if it's competitive. Does anyone want to take that one?
Not at all is the short answer. Yeah, the long answer, I mean, I guess it's better told through things like anecdotes. It's things like, oh, if I see a job posting that I'm interested in, but it also is right up Claire's alley, I'm not gonna hoard it. I'm gonna send it to her. We might even swap notes on how are things going? How's your cover letter looking? Things like that. It's super kind of collaborative. I think I don't know that we're all kind of consciously thinking this at all times, but the sort of the ethos I feel like is, you know, what's kind of good for an SOM student overall is good for us in the long run. Like, you know, it's just good to have your network in places that are useful to them, and it's good to have people go where they fit and they're your friends. So it's all very much like, here's some stuff that I like that you also like. That's why we're in the club together. I'm going to tell you about it. And classes, I think, are very much the same way. I found it super, super collaborative, whether or not it's by design, by which I mean like explicitly group projects or just, you know, form your own groups and talk about it kind of thing. It's all, the ex-accountants are super helpful. You know, people help each other out with their different specialties that they already had or knowledge that they already had coming into school.
Yeah, and on the coaching side, I can just say students, you know, we see firsthand students helping each other all the time. When students come to meet with us, they're always referencing conversations they had with their peers, with students in the class above them, whether that's helping them, you know, prep for interviews and mock with each other, or connecting each other with people in their own networks. You can definitely see that come to life. I will say, doesn't your club do some sort of gingerbread house competition?
It's a surprise. We've got to figure out how to do it online. So that's part of it. Yes. Is what makes our like D&I work really well is we have these traditions from the before times. So how do you put them in a digital context with keeping everybody safe, keeping everybody included if you're in a different time zone? And it's certainly, you know, post Thanksgiving, I think our student population is going to spread out a little more. So how do we do this in a way that really allows us to capitalize on what is good about Zoom? So it's not just like something that's sort of been retrofitted into this, but how can we really capitalize on this? So Rachel, we're working on it.
No, but I'm just saying, from past years, I've seen the competitive spirit come to life. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. When there's sugar
That is true.
involved, when there is candy or snacks, yes, we're extremely competitive.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Yeah, well, Dean Jane judges, and all you want out of your SOM experience is his approval. So that really brings out the competitive fighting spirit for sure.
There was a question that came in about what other activities you guys participate in. Does anyone want to share a little bit about some of the other things they get involved with?
Happy again to start. So I also lead one other club, which is called Voices. Voices is a little bit special, I guess, or different from other clubs. It's a event that happens once every week, and students share a sort of personal story about themselves. It's not, it was a safe, no technology, and now it's a non-recorded Zoom call. And it's just a chance to be kind of like really authentic. It's sort of, if you're familiar with things like the Moth, it's like the Moth but SOM. So I run that as well.
I am involved in the Economic Development Club, as well as Out of Office, which is the Queer Alliance. And then outside of SOM, I'm a policy researcher for antitrust. It's a program run by a law professor and an SOM professor who are both antitrust economists for the DOJ, in addition to being faculty here. And I also am involved in a publication at the Architecture School. And I mentioned those two examples because there's so much at SOM, and then there is a kind of infinite amount more beyond it. And these are kind of, they're resources that are social, and there are resources that are, very academic or very skills oriented. So there really is a wealth of opportunity here.
And I also sort of straddle line. D&I is my baby, and this is where I spend most of my time in brain and mental space. But I was an orientation leader this year, welcoming some of our new students. In the before times, I was a graduate affiliate for Pearson College, which is one of the undergraduate colleges, sort of talking to undergraduate students, showing them that they could go to business school, they could, not go to business school and end up at business school anyway. It was a nice way to sort of like get to know the wider Yale community. And there are other things like it feels like being a student at SOM is a full-time job. There's just so many panels, and so technically I'm involved with Women in Management, I'm technically involved with Technology Club, but really I go through all of our different events every week and say, oh, that looks nice, oh, look, that looks nice, and then I have 2 hours to sleep. So there's just a lot going on. I could never list it all.
Yeah, hopefully you guys get a little sleep. It sounds like you're all super busy. There was a question about how being a D&I club member, and maybe in your case, you can even talk as leaders, how that has helped you to professionally kind of hone your skills and explore your own creativity. Does anyone want to talk about that?
I've started a lot, but I could start again. I feel bad. So I came from what career-wise was a not very arts background, although my undergrad extracurriculars were very arts oriented. So for me, in a way, D&I was a very nice way of kind of seeing that I could combine both sides of my brain a little bit, or like bring some of that creativity into my job. I'd had a little bit of a taste for it in my pre-SOM career. My company actually got acquired by IBM. So in the twilight years of my pre-SOM career, I did spend some time with IBM product management teams doing what they called design thinking, but it was not really led, at least our team was not really led by people who were familiar with kind of these processes. It was just a lot of sort of lingo without the structure. And I have found that the D&I curriculum, the club curriculum, as well as classes like Innovator, which is one of the core classes, has really helped me to kind of formalize a little bit how to kind of bring some of that kind of like brainstormy energy to a problem that has no defined solution or no set solution, or what worked at the last client is not going to work at this client, and just like have a little bit of a structured approach to solving a problem that you just don't even know quite yet where you're going to end up at the end of the solution. Yeah.
And I think for me, you know, I'm coming from design, and I'm very familiar with like a more kind of a like traditional Western like design charrette sensibility, like something that like plays out over years in this very iterative way. And so I think, you know, to be honest, I entered SOM feeling like very confident in my abilities to kind of know DNI, and in kind of in the traditional design world, commercial applications of design, such as like what IDEO does, are frankly kind of frowned upon or seen as being easy. And I think coming to business school has been a very humbling experience, in that what I thought I knew well, I realized was actually just one piece of the broader puzzle. And I think that kind of perspective shifting is something that you hear a lot about from SOM students across fields. I have a friend named Oscar who worked for the National Bank of Mexico. He's going back into banking. He is like, you know, my finance homework guru. And even he is kind of like using SOM as a time to reframe his understanding of finance. And I think that my time here has actually been a great opportunity to reframe my understanding of innovation and the application of innovation and creativity across many sectors and fields. That's why I went to work for the government and for a finance firm this summer, for example. And I think another great piece of D&I at SOM is it is so collaborative with so many different students. We work with healthcare students, finance students, government students, education students, and just to be able to have that much exposure is very unique.
I'm going to ask one more question from the listeners, and then I'll wrap up with one more question on my end. There was a question that came in about kind of the open curriculum, especially in your second year, and how you go about choosing some of your classes. Maybe you guys could just go around and talk about like a cool class you're taking, or your favorite class, or something like that, just to shed a little light on the academic side.
Why don't I start so poor Isabelle doesn't have to jump
Sounds
on
good.
this one. So the reason I'm interested in technology specifically is I'm very interested in consumer insights and accessibility. So I am taking these sort of pendant classes. One is called strategic market measurement, and one is called listening to the customer. And they've given me sort of the tools to do like the data analysis that we use to derive real consumer insights. So one is like sort of straight quant, like here's how this works, let's put it all into R and see what pops out. And then the second half, listening to the customer, is how do you create questionnaires? How do you actually talk to people that you get data that is usable and that you can analyze? And I have loved it. The listening to the customer part of it, we are working with a student startup. So it's like a product that I'm super interested in, and I get to watch how all of this fits together. And it's really giving me the practical skills that I can then talk about in an interview, or talk about in a coffee chat that will hopefully one day lead to an interview, or certainly a cover letter. It gives me the material and the practical application that I didn't have in my career before this, that is really enjoyable and very fun.
Ian, do you want to share?
Sure. So I guess starting within SOM, you know, I really learned a lot from the core, and I'm just going to call the core like one firestorm that everyone has to go through that is truly so intense. I think I also want to take a moment here just to say that the core is really challenging and hard. And so to be a Yale SOM student is to be invested in academics to like a pretty serious degree. Like you will be working a lot. In addition to the core, competitive strategy, which is really a class about industry dynamics, is wonderful. I have learned a lot from all my finance classes. I've taken 2 finance classes outside of what is required of the core. Next spring, I really look forward to my competition economics and policy class, which is in the law school, and SOM I'm taking a semester-long class in the law school right now on critical race theory, which has just like profoundly shifted my understanding of kind of like race and power in the United States. And so I think, and there's some, I mean, I just like pulled up this little list that I pulled together for what I might take next spring. There's a philosophy class on justice, taxes, and global financial integrity. There's, you know, a religious studies class on cosmos and creation ideology. I mean, like you really can go as like niche or applied as you want, or critical as you want here. And I, you know, I think it's a great school for people who want to be self-directed in their learning.
Yeah. Yeah, you've caught us during the first round of bidding for spring classes, so we're all right in the midst of like, we just finished the choice overload and have like huge spreadsheets of courses across the university to think about. I think I will echo the competitive strategy elective. It's also one of my favorites. I'm also currently in a class, strategic management of nonprofits or nonprofit organizations, which, as discussed, is not my wheelhouse, but is something I would like to understand. It's also, again, I'm trying to get back to some of my theater roots. I have some friends who run a theater company in Chicago and trying to prep for that. It's been really, really interesting and fun for me as someone who's come from like very, very large finance. I think short of thinking of other classes, like broadly, the approach I've had to choosing coursework is in some ways very similar to kind of like, why would you come to the D&I club if you're not going into D&I? It's also like, well, why would I go into this finance class if I don't want to go into finance? But for me, it's like been very important to kind of understand, be able to at least credibly challenge people and understand the language and understand what's going on. You know, I came into SOM sort of like, I don't know what I don't know. And there's so much opportunity. There's more opportunity than you will have time to tap as far as like going in and grabbing hold of things that you really don't understand and taking those courses with people who are really, really top of their field. So like, I'm also in a finance class right now that is kicking my butt a little bit, but is really, really valuable in the long run. Just so many things.
Well, I'm going to just ask one final quick wrap-up question because I know we only have a couple more minutes left. Maybe you guys could all just go briefly around and quickly answer this one. What advice do you have for candidates preparing to apply to SOM, and kind of just generally, what do you wish you had known when applying? Claire, maybe we'll start with you.
I was a waitlist get in. So my advice is like, don't stop hoping and don't stop sort of fighting for yourself. I saw a question further on that was about like, you know, oh, do I need to have a specific plan post-grad or not? You should definitely talk to admissions about this. But for me, coming from the arts world where there's no real way to sort of have a, I want to be this when I'm X age, because that's just not how promotions and job progression works in that industry. I had a very sort of generic essay about what I wanted to be. And when I talked to admissions, they're like, no, what do you want to do? So I was like, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. You know, I have a plan, I have a strategy. This is why I think you specifically can help me get there. That helped, apparently.
Isabelle?
Yeah, things I wish I knew. I think certainly being confident in my resume as it was. I think I spent a lot of time being like, where are the gaps? What things can I do to close those gaps in the next, 2 weeks or whatever? And I really just stood on my own, and you'll end up where you're meant to end up. My piece of advice is a little bit to echo Claire. As I said, I came in with kind of like, I could do a gajillion things. Two important things to note: no one is going to come to you and be like, on your admissions essay, though, you said you wanted to go into consumer packaged goods. So like, why aren't you going to the P&G thing? So like, you can develop as you come here what your strategy is. I think what's most important is to be able to express, like, I have an idea of what are the kinds of things I'm going to look for. I have an idea of what the resources are at SOM. I know what they're called. I know what the Women's Club is called. I know what the D&I Club is called. I know how I plan to use them. And I have a clear idea of like how I'm going to get from here to there. And there might be, you know, a role that looks like this. As long as you can kind of express like why SOM specifically and what are the resources I know that are there and at the broader university, they're going to help me get from A to B and be able to tell that story really clearly. At least that was how I kind of approached those questions.
Ian?
Yeah, I think two things. One is I wanted to echo what Claire said. I too was waitlisted, and I felt like that for business schools, if you are coming from outside of the traditional like corporate American path or what is known, you have to do a lot of work to kind of explain yourself. And I just find that to be one of the challenges of the admissions process for someone who isn't coming from a professional field that is like immediately understood in the eyes of sort of a legacy MBA program. And I think with that kind of internal search that is required to both be legible and also authentic, like think about what you would do outside of going to an MBA program. You know, we spent the past 45 minutes talking a lot about, you know, all the resources and opportunities and access that come with, you know, inclusion in an elite exclusive place. And there are just so many other ways to grow. And I think like the kind of most meaningful part of my admissions process was realizing that I actually didn't need an MBA. And then so when I got in, I just felt like I really knew exactly what I was going to get out of the MBA experience that was unique to graduate school. And I also knew what graduate school wasn't going to offer me that I could have gotten if I just stayed working. And so I kind of say this because I feel like a lot of the admissions process kind of puts everyone in this defensive position where they're trying to sell themselves to a place. But, you know, there are also just like so many opportunities out there. And I feel like it's far healthier to go through the process, trying to find the right fit and knowing how you fit and what you need, rather than like selling yourself as an applicant to Yale.
Yeah, well said. Well, I know we're out of time. I could talk to you guys all day. I know you have places to be. So thank you so much to our fabulous panelists for sharing this great insight and perspective. And thank you to everyone who logged in. We hope to meet you in the near future. Good luck with the process, and have a great day. Bye, everybody.